Our webinar is scheduled to start today at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, which from here in snowy North Carolina is only 2 minutes away, so please stand by before we get started. Hello from North Carolina State University in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Forestry Webinars Planning in the Face of Change and Urban Forestry Webinar Series. Today's topic, Green Infrastructure. Before we get started on today's webinar, for the benefit of those who are using this Collaborate Blackboard technology for the first time, we're going to walk you through a short orientation. We hope that you will understand that today's webinar will be done in listen mode only, but we encourage you to use the chat window at the lower left-hand corner of the Collaborate screen. When you use this chat, you will be sending messages that can be seen by all attendees, so bear this in mind. Before we get started, for the benefit of our presenters, we'd like to know a little bit more about those of you who are attending. You will see that it's possible for you to participate in a little quiz that we are offering. We'd like to know a little bit about our audience. So if you wouldn't mind, please use the A through E section choices available on your screen, and you can record your selection using the little box that is located under your name in the upper left-hand section of your window. As a matter of fact, I already see responses coming in. And so we'll give this a minute to let everyone weigh in on their location. You will see that your selection is showing up to the right of your name in the main room listing of the attendees that are participating today. After we've given most of you the chance to respond to this little poll, I'll publish the results so that we all know where each of us is employed. Now that most of us have had a chance to respond, here's what that looks like. Most of the attendees picked E for other, so we'll have to explore further later on to find out what that means. But the state and federal municipal employed persons definitely are coming in second. Thank you very much for participating in that poll. Now we'd like to ask you another question, and that is, where are you today? In our webinar series, we typically have people from all parts of the United States, usually more in the eastern U.S., but we chose a 2 p.m. time frame for today's webinar in the hopes that it would be more convenient for the participants who come to us from more Western time zones. So please respond to this poll now, telling us what part of the United States you're in at this time as you participate in this webinar. And if you are just joining us, we are participating in a small poll to help identify where our participants are coming from. You can participate in this poll now by selecting A through E through the little box that appears under your name in the upper left-hand side of the webinar screen. I believe most people have probably had the option now of stating where they're from, so let's have a look at those responses. Yes, as predicted, D, the Eastern Time Zone, does have the majority of participants. And if you're like us in North Carolina, you're looking out your window at some combination of ice and snow, or at least cold weather. So the webinar is perfectly designed for you today. Thank you. Moving on. At the end of today's webinar, we're going to have an option for those of you who signed in requesting professional continuing education credits to participate in a satisfaction survey and to take a short quiz. It's 5 questions, but participation in both the survey and the quiz are required in order to qualify to get the continuing education credits. Those credits are coming today from Society of American Foresters and International Society of Arboriculture. So please remember to stick with us through the entire presentation of 1 hour and participate in the satisfaction survey and the quiz so that you can have those continuing education certificates automatically emailed to you after the webinar. Now I'd like to introduce you to the moderator for today's webinar. Nancy Stairs comes to us from the North Carolina Forest Service in the office in downtown Raleigh, North Carolina. She is the person heading up the Urban and Community Forestry Program with the North Carolina Forest Service and has administrative duties that include their grant program. Nancy will discuss a few things and then introduce us to our guest presenter for today. So Nancy, I'm going to turn this over to you and make sure you hit that talk button in the upper left-hand corner. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Kelly. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. This is a webinar series that we decided to offer simply because we see a lot of planning decisions, a lot of issues coming up for communities, and there are aspects that almost every community may be addressing to some degree. So Urban Wood was last month. This month is green infrastructure. We have several others as well that we will be talking about. But some of the things that we've been doing here in North Carolina is we worked with the Green Infrastructure Center and Karen Firehock to develop this Evaluating Conserving Green Infrastructure Across the Landscape, a practitioner's guide. Now Karen, her organization, has done a similar guide for Virginia, Arkansas, and New York, and each of those has a specific chapter relating to the state, but certainly the information that is in these guides is very useful and could be applied anywhere. So if you want to access that, simply because Karen's website address is a little shorter than the North Carolina Forest Service, you can link there and then link to where we have this particular guide posted. We also have an 8-page quick guide which kind of boils down the 140-page larger guide and can be printed and used a little more easily, and that is on our website as well. Some other things that we have developed, this is specific for North Carolina, but we're hoping that it may provide assistance to other communities, is a guide for developing a tree protection ordinance. So it does have specific references to North Carolina, but it provides a lot of examples from other ordinances and how they've dealt with, or the kinds of clauses they're using to deal with specific issues that are of concern. So that is something we are working on and will also have on our website. If you ever want to get to us, it will be probably the easiest thing is just Google NCFS and urban forestry, and that'll take you right to our page. So that is, and then also the regulatory strategies for incorporating green infrastructure is a brief guide on some of the tools we have in North Carolina. So they are focused for North Carolina, but other states, or people in other states might want to look and see the kinds of tools that are being utilized in other places to see what kind of tools that they might want to consider to be developing where they are. So with that being said, the kinds of things that we're doing relating to green infrastructure, I'd like to hand this over to Karen Firehock. She is the person who has worked with us with the guide and also does a lot of community-based planning efforts, taking people through the steps to develop what their priorities are when they're looking at maintaining green infrastructure, maintaining functionality of the landscape, and incorporating that into ongoing development so that you can have green infrastructure and you can have development both. Go ahead, Karen.
Okay, thank you very much for everyone logging in today. It's always tough to talk to people I can't see, but I will talk to my screen and hope to keep this lively as we go through it. So today I'm going to walk you through a series of concepts as well as some case examples to help bring home the points. So just a quick infomercial. I direct the Green Infrastructure Center, and we are a nonprofit organization, and we were formed to help communities evaluate their green or natural assets and manage them to maximize ecological, economic, and cultural returns. And we do this by building landscape models at any scale, from regions to states to cities to towns. We also teach courses and workshops, and we do research into new methodologies, and that's why we are not-for-profit. We try to develop new methods and then share them broadly with our colleagues. So we work in many different places. We were launched in Virginia, and we have conducted 18 different projects at multiple scales, from multi-county regions to counties, cities, towns, and watersheds. And we've worked in New York, New Jersey, Arkansas, North Carolina, and we've just completed a guide for South Carolina as well as doing research for large regions. So if you're interested in learning more about our projects or seeing case booklets, we have them available for free to download from our website at gicinc.org/projects. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about why we need to plan better, why we need this kind of work. I'm going to define green infrastructure. There are several definitions floating out there. I'm going to give you a little bit of the history and the origin and how to think about it. Then I'm going to go into green infrastructure ecology very briefly. I'm going to talk about planning at multiple scales. I'm going to take you through a case example that goes from a region down to an individual tree. And then I'm going to talk about key messages, how to make the point. And just to be clear, as Nancy said, we have an entire guidebook. We teach semester-long courses, so there is much more to this than I'll be able to cover in 1 hour. So again, I encourage you to take a look at some of our other materials and case studies. So I'll begin with the first question, which is where to develop. And if I ask for a show of hands for how many folks had heard of smart growth, I guess that most of you have heard of it. But it's essentially using existing great infrastructure to determine where should we grow and develop. Let us try to grow near our existing towns, highways, the infrastructure that we've already invested in, and make smart investments. But is this enough? The typical plan, we take our county or our locality and we make a plan to conserve it. Maybe we save one half and decide to build on the other half. I see this quite a lot, especially in rural counties. But is that enough? It's a simple approach, but it doesn't really consider where our resources are located. So what we need to consider is where are all of our natural assets and our built assets. So where are our best wetlands, our best agricultural soils, our forests, our views, our towns, our schools, our roads, where are all of these things so that we can think about the gray and the green together and be both smart and green. And why do we need to do this? Well, when we don't think about this, when we have no planning or poor planning, we get increased traffic congestion, poor water quality, poor air quality, loss of critical habitat, and loss of working lands. And while you viewed this slide, America lost another 3 acres of open space. I took the national rate of land loss and calculated how long it took me to say that slide. So the takeaway message here is that we need to get going quickly to start rethinking the patterns in which we grow and develop. Traditional development, all of you have probably seen this. You take your site and you just divide it up into parcels, throw in some cul-de-sacs, and you're done. Clustering, a little bit more innovative, taking your site and considering some of the natural features and functions on the site, as well as things people like to enjoy, such as nature trails. So using smaller lots, clustering your parcels closer together and your buildings, and then having some opportunity to enjoy some of the site features. However, clustering all by itself is not enough to really get us the conservation goals that we need. So here's a problem that we see typically. Everyone is clustered on their site, but the clusters do not connect. And I work with developers quite a lot where each developer has made their own plan for green space conservation and none of them connect. But we can keep the landscape connected. However, what's required to do that is to plan at a larger scale. And to quote a president of our state's home building association, he said, "I will connect the landscape, but you need to tell me what to connect and where." So really important to try to have some sort of pre-thinking, a master plan, if you will, a greenway plan, have something on a map that people can understand. Okay. All right, so what is green infrastructure? I promised to get into definitions a little bit. Well, we all know what gray infrastructure is, and here you see at the left Washington, D.C., and this is what planners typically think of. It's got the roads, it's got the buildings, it's got the bridge network, a little bit of blue infrastructure with the Anacostia River. But on the right-hand side, that's the green infrastructure. That's the tree canopy that helps keep the city cool. Trees, of course, provide oxygen, which we all need. They also clean the air by uptaking volatile organic compounds. They help us with stormwater management by capturing and evapotranspiring water. And another kind of fun fact about trees, they make you nicer. So we often kid around that it would be nice to get Congress down into Rock Creek Park for the day, and maybe they could all be a little nicer too. So these are some of the things we try to think about, and we're trying to encourage communities to not plan for their trees, for example, as an afterthought, but planning for them as part of growth and development as well as redevelopment. So where did the term come from? Green infrastructure is a bit of a jargon term. It was actually coined by the state of Florida. And it was coined by the state employees. They were trying to help the governor understand that the natural resources of Florida were also part of its infrastructure. So things like the Everglades, the River of Grass, the wonderful intact forests up in the eastern panhandle, all of the wetlands, Lake Okeechobee, all of the different features, the agricultural soils, all of the different things that make up the ecology of the state of Florida. And they wanted the governor to think about that just as he was thinking about all the road networks and bridge networks and other things that were needed. And this was very successful. And in fact, Florida designated a large chunk of money to actually acquire lands, both for conservation and recreation, some primarily for one or the other. But they used this network idea. They built an actual model of what the best habitats were so that they could make smarter decisions about what to acquire and how to do it. So if I asked for another show of hands and I said, how many of you had heard of green infrastructure as best management practices, things like green rooftops or rain gardens, I bet I'd see a lot of hands coming up. In 2006, EPA started calling what was previously called integrated best management practices, previously referred to as low impact development, started calling it green infrastructure. And this led to some confusion because previously it was large landscape scales, and now we're talking about everything as green infrastructure. So I'm going to help you with a little bit of how to think about this. So let's start with trees. Think about them as the original green infrastructure. They give us all the benefits that I already discussed. And if we want to think about them as infrastructure in our city, we can think about them for stormwater management and realize that trees intercept anywhere from 760 to 4,000 gallons per tree per year, depending on the species. So this is a really important tool as we try to think about how to take care of our cities and how to make them livable. And why is this important? Why do we need to think about right order, starting with the natural and then moving into the constructed? A quick story, working with a nonprofit housing group, they came to me and said, Karen, we have a development plan and we think that you will really like it. We've put a lot of green features into our development plan. We have a lot of rain gardens in our site. And I said, that's wonderful. Let me see where those rain gardens are going. And when I looked, I realized that they had planned to remove the large oak trees on the site and install rain gardens. So I'm sure most of you can understand that that's not a good idea. The trees were already providing free stormwater management, and we didn't need to cut them down and replace them with constructed features. So they kept the trees on the site, and they're still doing a great job today. So the key is right order thinking. So some of the benefits of doing this work: conserving working land, such as farms and forests, protecting, preserving water quality and supply, providing cost-effective stormwater management and hazard mitigation, preserving biodiversity and wildlife habitat, and also improving public health, quality of life, and recreation networks. One of the ways we try to differentiate sort of green infrastructure today from constructed infrastructure is to think about them as natural assets. So we talk about agricultural soils. They're important for healthy food production. We think about our water systems. We think about our forest and wetland systems. We try to think about all of these systems as part of our natural assets, things that we need to understand where they are, what's their abundance, and what's their health, so that we can do a better job of managing our natural resource portfolio. We also think about how these things support our culture and history. So beautiful wineries that you want to go out to the countryside to enjoy. You're also really concerned with the setting around that. Pick your own fruit stands, historic sites, historic trails. All of these things are important to our culture and history, and we also include them when we make maps and try to think about how well the landscape supports and protects those uses. And why does this matter? Well, here's a typical southern plantation house located not too far from us, and there it is today. And so you can clearly see that this site has lost its context. The landscape around it was not protected, even though the building still stands. So that's why it's so important to also think about landscape conservation when you're thinking about history and culture. So in conclusion, the way we think about this is, for new development, is it the right site to develop in the first place? If yes, how do the natural features on this site connect to other sites and vice versa? How can I minimize my site impact? So once you've decided it's the right site, how can you maybe have a smaller footprint of your buildings, of your parking lots, and still keep connections? And once you have the right site, you've maximized its connections and protected sensitive features, then and only then can you ask how to mitigate the impacts. So low impact development would be the last strategy that I would look to. And if the site has been impacted, I might also consider restoring natural features, like reconstructing the wetlands that might have once been there. So takeaway point: first conservation and then mitigation with LID and other methods. So now I'm going to move into actual Green Infrastructure Ecology 101, just to take everyone through some basic ecological principles. So green infrastructure planning is not just about protecting the wetlands here or a lake there. It's about actually thinking about the whole landscape as a connected network, thinking about not just intact large tracts of habitat, but also how well they are connected through a series of corridors. And I'm going to talk now a little bit about interior habitat, and this is the only math I'll be doing today. But when we are looking, especially in the east, we look at an intact area of at least 100 acres of an intact interior habitat. If I was out in the west, if there's any Westerners on the phone, I might be looking at something more like 1,000 acres. But in any case, we look at whether we have enough interior, and to figure that out, we're going to subtract the edge from the interior. So we take a distance of 2 to 3 canopy heights, and then we multiply that times 3, and that tells us the distance that we subtract, and that's our edge. We then ask, what's left? And if we've got about 100 acres in the middle, that tells us that that's large enough to be considered what we call a habitat core. If it is even bigger, fantastic. If we've got 1,000 acres or a 2,000 acre habitat core, that's wonderful. And shape does matter. I just put this illustration up to remind us that round is actually the best shape in terms of having the best ratio of interior to edge. If you get things that are long and skinny or funky shaped like the image on the right, you have less interior habitat. If we bisect our cores, say with a road or a power line, we start to get more of that edge and we have much less interior. So we try to avoid these bisecting or fragmentings whenever we can. Certain species prefer interior forest cores, so things such as cerulean warblers or scarlet tanagers, mammals such as black bears, bobcats or flying squirrels, or amphibians such as a spotted salamander. And so we also are concerned with rare, threatened, and endangered species, so we also look to try to protect them. And since we're doing this webinar in partnership with North Carolina today, I thought I would just show some species from North Carolina. I especially like the star-nosed mole in the bottom left corner. It looks like something from outer space. But it is a species that is threatened with habitat loss. So we try to look at how we can best protect our rare species. But we also want to keep common species common. We want to avoid things getting on this list because once species are on this list, it's very difficult to remove them. So to keep biodiversity strong, one of the things we want to do is to try to make sure that our landscape is connected through corridors. Lots of different things use the corridors between, so things like mammals such as the black bear, birds such as woodpeckers. Plants move across the landscape through seed dispersal. Pollinators, really important. People who are concerned about our food supply should also be concerned with habitat for pollinators. And then also people like to move across the landscape. So a lot of these corridors also provide opportunities for recreation. Corridors are not necessarily uniform. So ideally, we'd like to have a 300-meter width at a minimum. That allows us to have at least 100 meters of safe space in the middle after we've subtracted out the edge. When we don't have these large corridors, species can still hop across. So especially in coastal environments, sometimes we're looking more at a patchy landscape, and we'll see how many ways we can connect the dots. When we lose some of these interior cores, we find that we can't get across the landscape. If there's something like a storm or species extirpation, something happens to the species, if we've lost that little connector patch, then we might see decline. So really important to try to find as many connectors as possible. And then over time, cores may be developed, so we need to keep the data up to date and make sure that we're not counting something that's actually been developed and is no longer an intact landscape. When we have more edge, we have more impact zones, and so we have sun, wind, and people that can get in and cause trouble. We also have invasive species that can cause trouble, and this image on the right is the brown-headed cowbird, which takes advantage of the edge by laying its eggs in other birds' nests. And so in areas where you have a lot of edge, you'll start to lose your native songbirds and your population will become primarily dominated by this naughty, lazy bird. Type of edge also matters. So actually nature likes messy. And so if you look at the top, we have a hard edge. At the bottom, we have a more gradual change in height and composition of the shrubs and trees, and so that actually facilitates some species such as quail that like to dart in and out. So whenever we can, we try to have our forest edges a little bit messy. There are a lot of planning applications for this work. I'm not going to go through all of them today, although that would be a 10-hour webinar. But just to remind you that there are a lot of things you can use these maps and models for, in terms of developing new ordinances, making plans to protect species, figuring out where conservation easements should go, transportation planning, many, many ways you can use this information. So for example, if you're trying to figure out where new parks might be located, looking at where population centers are, where people need access to the outdoors, but we can also satisfy other goals such as protecting key habitats or rare species. So trying to marry these two goals together, we can be more effective. There's a lot of tools to do this work. I'm going to walk through a few of them today. So again, since we are doing this webinar today in partnership with North Carolina, I did want to point out that many states have wonderful resources already available. So in North Carolina, they have something really wonderful called the Green Growth Toolbox. Even if you're not in North Carolina, I highly recommend you take a look at it. There's a lot of neat land and site planning tools that you can adapt, and I'm sure they'd be happy to share them with you if you'd like to adapt some of them for your state. But really great tools to help people think about how to do land conservation effectively as we grow and develop. And then, as Nancy mentioned at the beginning, we have a series of different guides, and I have a South Carolina guide at the press right now. If you don't see your state listed here, we do also have a national guidebook coming out soon through Island Press. So we are trying to cover the universe with these guides, but one of the things that they do in the individual guides for each state is they provide a model that tells you how to actually create the maps using data for your state. So there's 6 basic steps for green infrastructure planning. And the guides take you through these in great detail, which I don't have time to do today, but I'll just walk you through them briefly. Of course, set your goals. What's important to your community? What you map and model are based on what's important to you. Are you trying to protect drinking water? Are you trying to provide more recreation? Are you trying to protect urban livability? What are the things that are important to you? Then next, what's the data that you have? What do you have available to you right now? What might you need to create? From that, make a map. Then ask yourself what's at risk. So it's not enough just to make a map, but what's at risk? What might go away if no action is taken? From that, what are the best opportunities? Is there something that might be lost? You need to jump on that right away. Is there something that is really easy and reasonable to protect now, so you might as well get it done? And then implement, thinking about all the different ways you can implement this. And I want to point out very quickly, this work is not something where you create yet another plan that you put on a shelf with all the other plans. This is really a new way of doing business, incorporating this data into everything that you do, whether you're planning for new parks, whether you're thinking about zoning, whether you're thinking about what land to develop, whether you're thinking about building a nature trail. Whatever you're doing, this should become part of that everyday thinking process. We often work with communities to help them figure out what they want to do. We often begin with a pre-assessment to think of what's important to the community, so really trying to understand what their issues are. We usually have a stakeholder review group. Sometimes we divide that up into a more technical group and then a stakeholder group such as the Planning Commission. We might make a multi-stakeholder group. We usually have an introduction. We teach them about the concepts before we start making maps, propose what we would map, review the maps with everyone that we've created, and finalize, and then create a strategy. So really important to think about how you're going to get the information, how you're going to organize everyone, because it's really important to have people help create these so that they buy into them, they care about them, and they want to use them in their work. So one of the things I also want to point out as we do this work is we don't simply just look for large areas of habitat. We also build models to rank them. We look at how big they are. We look at the species diversity that's there. Are there rare species that are there? How water rich are they? That helps to protect other species. If it's in a coastal area, is it a dune system? We look at the soil diversity. A lot of different things go into this so that we actually know, of all the lands that we might protect, which are the highest quality. So I'm going to show you an example from one county. This is Nelson County in Virginia, and VANLA stands for the Virginia Natural Landscape Assessment. The county has over 300,000 acres of high-quality habitat. It's primarily a rural county. A large chunk of those are outstanding quality. In this model, red is the best. And we can actually select that core, and then using our model, we can click on it and see that it has 20,000 acres, 14 rare species are in there, and 5,000 of those acres are supporting our drinking water supply. So this is one way we can start to use the information to inform key, people goals like drinking clean water. We also look at thematic overlay maps, so we want to delve deeper on a particular issue such as water how well protected is our reservoir, or where are impaired waters and how can we use these habitat projects to help protect impaired waters or clean them up, where are community wells located, a lot of different things that we will map. So a typical project doesn't have just one map, it usually has a series of say 20 maps where you might delve deeper on a particular issue of concern. We often invite the community to also help make maps. We call it a favorite places map. We bring people out and ask them to tell us their favorite things about the county, and then we'll overlay that on the data to show this was an important habitat core. It was also a place where people really like to go bird watching and hiking, or they love the view there. It's a really great way to get buy-in for your project, and it's also a great way to help, ground truth your information, as well as figure out, hey, maybe this area is even more important than we thought because everyone really cherishes it. As I said earlier, we might need to update the cores as they are developed, and they may be lost over time. So you may change your priorities and protect other areas. Now I'm going to take you quickly through some different scale thinking. I'm going to take you from the region all the way down to the site. So to see all scales, I'm going to take you through the Virginia case study that we did in the Richmond region, which is in the sort of eastern part of the state around our state capital. And I'm going to use this example because this is a place where we have experimented with this at every scale. So first, looking at just this region, and this is looking at the counties around the capital city, so the different counties and then the region in the middle. Just look at land cover, just saying, what's green, what's gray. That's useful, but it doesn't tell you a whole lot. It's gray around the city where you would expect it. But then if we ask what's at least 10 acres, that gives us a very different picture. We start to see that the map starts to speckle. And we start to see that, yes, actually there is quite a lot of fragmentation occurring. But we can also ask which of this is the best. So again, using that model that I pointed out earlier, we can start to say what's the best quality habitat, and that's where we have the orange and yellow, the very high to high. And that tells us that there may be rare species there may be unique wetlands there. There are many things within those habitat areas that we might want to pay attention to. And then we look at change over time. So this map looked at minimal change, which is green, significant change in gray, and loss of interior habitat in black. But there's still quite a lot there. And so we say, what's the highest quality? Let's just select the highest quality cores out of that map. And then working with the communities in that region, with every county and the cities, we came up with a set of priorities for everyone to work together on. And the Planning District Commission has all of this data and helps them to coordinate across scales when they're doing transportation planning or park planning, or when they're helping any of these localities with their comprehensive planning process. I'm going to zoom now into New Kent County to show you what this data looks like at a zoomed-in scale. And this is, we did a series of maps, but I picked this one in particular because it shows you that we also looked at culture and history along with green infrastructure. So the dark green are their highest ranked habitats in the state. Lighter green is forest cover, but the dark green is the most unique, highest quality. And then you can see how we overlaid recreation such as boat ramps or horseback riding, historic sites like Captain John Smith's Water Trail, that dark blue line going along the bottom there. And so we look at how these landscapes also serve as a backdrop and a protection zone for that important history and culture. And New Kent County did adopt this map as well as all the other maps into their comprehensive plan so that as they grow and develop, they can try to work to protect those highest quality resources. The takeaway point, you cannot protect everything. So it's really important to have some sense of what's most important. Now we're going to look at how we might zoom into even finer scale, and this little pink blob in the middle is my version of the city of Richmond, but we use real data here, so the green things going through are habitat cores and blue are rivers. We're going to zoom into the corner of the city here. We had a big chunk of habitat on one side, another big chunk on the other, and we did an analysis of vacant parcels, and we found that, wow, we've got a whole ton of vacant parcels that go between these two habitats. So when we're thinking urban, we're starting to think, how might we restore green infrastructure? And in this case, we said, yes, indeed, we could thread a greenway through that site. And I also want to point out we did not use all of the parcels. We left opportunities for redevelopment. so that over time a greenway could be maintained while we could also have infill and redevelopment. So now going into, again, to the city at a finer grain scale, I'm going to zoom into Richmond in the middle of the district. At the city scale, there are many things that become important. This is showing some of the habitat cores, but it's also showing historic sites. It's showing the James River that goes through the middle of the city, many different things that are important to them. And this shows us sort of the green infrastructure. But we asked, how can we restore even more of it? So this is just a quick map showing that the city was small on the left. It got bigger. People left the city. And then you see the little green dots filling in the image at right. That's what we're asking. How can we use some of this vacancy in the city of Richmond to actually help it become a greener city? So we did a green infrastructure study for the city. And we looked at every scale from city to district to neighborhood to project. We looked at land cover, specifically tree canopy here, and we saw that while the city has 42% tree canopy, which is a pretty good number for a post-industrial southern city, we also saw that it's got a lot of urban areas that are devoid of trees or don't have enough trees. So a lot of the downtown and the places they want to have redevelopment have tree numbers more like 8%. So we used this map to work with the city's foresters to have them target their tree planting efforts to the areas most in need. So they didn't have a strategy before, and now they do. We also looked at vacancy. We looked at where all those vacant parcels are, and we said, how can we use those to regreen? As I mentioned, we found 9,000 vacant parcels in the city that might provide opportunities for regreening. But we didn't just stop there. We analyzed those parcels, and so we said, of these parcels, which also include priority conservation areas, which might help us with water quality, which might help us increase park access, which might be linked together to be a greenway, which might help us connect our network. And so in those teal colors, those were the highest ranked parcels that met all those criteria. So you can use this data in many different ways to help you be more strategic. And indeed, the city could now use this in their greenway planning and their bike and pedestrian planning. And then we looked at Richmond's master plans. So they were also concerned with stormwater, and probably some of you on this call are also concerned with stormwater. Richmond is under a consent decree, like many cities with EPA, to try to deal with their combined sewer overflows. Not all of the city has that. Some of them have separate storm sewer systems, but the city was looking for a way to try to get more water to infiltrate. And so we said, let's pick one demonstration watershed, an area that has a lot of green assets, but also a lot of concerns and issues. And so we picked the Upper Goods Creek watershed, which is just south of the James River in the city. And this outline shows you the watershed. And our question was, and still is, how do we make an urban environment function like a forest? And the answer is not ask everyone to leave. We have to think about how can we try to poke holes in this urban landscape and bring back some of that functionality that we've lost. And so again, pulling up our model, we say which of those teal parcels that I showed you earlier, those are maybe very important for water quality. We looked at where tree canopy is. We started looking at the different layers to help us make a prioritization scheme. And we said we can't do this by ourselves, so we need to engage everyone. We formed a watershed coalition made up of agencies from the city as well as the community and local conservation groups. And they created these 6 themed areas of clean environment, green streets, walkability, beautification, more parks, and urban forest, so that they could have themed teams to work on these issues. And there are many different things that you can do once you get down to that smaller community scale, a lot of new opportunities. So I'm not going to walk through these all today, but we used quite a few of these in the watershed. And to take you through one example site, this is how the Goods Creek looks on the left. You can see a pretty eroding stream bank. I used an arrow to show you where it is. It looks lush from the air, but it actually looks like that picture on the right. And so he said, to the left. So we said, how can we replant that creek? How can we use this vacant land that was next to where a new green school is going to be built? How can we take this sort of vacant area that's mostly open and turn it into something that's more ecologically sound and also provides benefits for the community? And so we made a new master plan for this little area. It's only a 2-acre site, but it's a little jewel within a very developed urban area. And so we looked at how we could plant trees along the stream. We restored understory trees where they were lacking. We built nature trails and gardens and did habitat restoration. And these are just some of the pictures showing the site later on, planting trees. We worked a lot with local sponsors to raise the money, so everything was paid for by foundation and corporation grants, and lots of community education went on. So it's a nice little project, and it's still going on today. So how do we rethink how we develop? I just have a quick example of this. We'll often look at parcels and realize that they're zoned for development, and right through the middle of them goes one of our key habitat corridors or habitat cores, etc. So we think, how can we change this plan? And so what this is showing is parcel A and parcel B, and the green is an existing habitat corridor, and the blue line is the stream. And in this particular community, they don't allow development right within 100 feet of the stream, so we kind of grade that out. But existing zoning would allow all of parcel A and all of parcel B to develop, except for that little strip along the stream. But we said, what if we took a clustering approach? We might lose a little of parcel B and some of A. And what does that get us? All right, with conventional development, if you look at the totals on the left column, we get 56 units at 1 lot per acre. With the clustered, we got 84 units out of the development scheme, and we still protected the majority of the green space. So a lot of this is not saying you cannot develop, but we're asking, how can we develop in better patterns that conserve more of our resources so that we can have healthy communities? So takeaway points, need to think at multiple scales outside of just the parcel. We need to think about the landscape context for all of these things. And we need to think of systems and nested landscape elements. So I'm going to end with what I kind of kid around as my Amway presentation. But what that means is I'm going to talk about how to make the case, how to sell these ideas to colleagues. I'm sure everyone on the phone is part of the choir, but I'll just give you some examples of tips we use for making the case. And these are all covered in our guidebook. So social marketing, most of you guys have heard of that. It arose in the 1970s, and it's basically the idea of how to sell you something. And everyone on the phone is probably familiar with this character, Smokey Bear. And you're so familiar with it, in fact, that you know the rest of that sentence that comes after only you. Because this is one of the most successful advertising campaigns in the U.S. history. So it's a great campaign, and we want to use these ideas to try to help us sell positive messages. Positive messages sell while negatives don't. So Smokey Bear is telling you that you have the power, you can make the difference. It's a very positive take action type of message. And so if you want to save a forest, be more effective to say, hey, let's conserve large connected tracts whenever possible to get the best possible wildlife conservation. Instead of saying negative things like, stop building in the woods. And we can also think about this as a tool for meeting or avoiding regulations. A lot of people say, that's very nice, but I have to deal with all these regulations. So if you have TMDLs, total maximum daily loading of pollutant studies you have to do, and you have to clean up a waterway, we say, use these maps to identify areas that might be at risk in the future and protect them now. And for areas that have already been impaired, use these maps to say, how can we better protect these areas and try to restore our rivers, streams, and wetlands. And in stormwater programs, again, same idea. Use this information to help you address stormwater problems. When we work with cities on stormwater issues, often the first step we take is, let's look at your tree canopy. So we start again with natural infrastructure because it's the most effective way to try to deal with these. So, as again I said, we're going to talk about selling. So a nice little point, if you're trying to sell protecting forests, forest cover protects surface water sources. And American Water Works found that a 10% increase in forest cover reduced chemical treatment costs for drinking water by 20%. Why is that? That's because forests help clean land runoff, and so the water arrives at your reservoir or your river intake much cleaner. And so we use that as a tool to help communities plant more trees or to make the argument for why we should invest in reforesting our watersheds. Canopy values, right? So urban trees. We all know trees make areas pretty, but did you also know that a study by the University of Washington found people shop longer and more often in tree-lined areas and spend about 12% more money? So what's the key message here? Trees give you more tax revenue even in already developed commercial districts. So if your locality is wondering, should we really spend the money to build a proper tree well and protect our trees? The answer is yes, because you will not only get more tax revenue, you'll also rent your commercial office space sooner, your property values will be higher, you'll get all that money back in real estate assessments as well as sales tax. And then thinking about our home values, we'll take an example here from North Carolina. Homes in Shepherd's Vineyard development adjacent to the American Tobacco Trail sold for $5,000 more than other homes in the neighborhood. So there's a lot of data out there showing that trails and natural areas help increase property values. And actually, the larger the park is, the more significant the property value increase. So parks actually give you a better tax base. So instead of saying we can't afford to invest in parks, realize you'll get that money back. And then, of course, as I said, large areas have a more significant impact on property values. But did you know that natural areas are better at providing property value than urban parks, playgrounds, skate parks, or even golf courses? In North Carolina, parks in Mecklenburg County generate 5 times more economic benefits than they cost. So bigger intact natural forest areas give you money. And then, of course, I like to cite places like the National Association of Realtors. They found in a survey of home buyers, 1 to 2% wanted to go golfing, 5 to 6% wanted to swim, but more than 50% used paths. So paths are the most desired landscape feature. And 57% of voters are more likely to purchase a home near green space, and 50% will pay 10% more. So what that means is you can actually sacrifice some of your building lots in a development and turn it into green space. You'll get that money back because you'll sell the adjacent and nearby homes for a better profit. And don't forget to connect your green space across your parcels. Okay, job development. I'm sure if I ask for a show of hands, how many have heard, we can't talk about the environment, all we can talk about is jobs, jobs, jobs. So let's talk about jobs. Well, small companies, especially those that have well-paid, skilled workforce, place a strong importance on the green of the local environment. And especially with people becoming more mobile and being able to work from anywhere, and I'm sure some of you are logging in from home with the storms today, the key here is that people can choose where they live more readily now, and they're choosing to live in those communities that are greener. The creative class also, folks that make up artists, media, lawyers, and analysts, they're 30% of the U.S. workforce, and they place a premium on outdoor recreation and access to nature. So protecting your natural assets give you better paid jobs and thus a better tax base. And in fact, many cities have been outcompeting sort of more established cities, more smaller cities are outcompeting them because they have taken care of their green space. Trees for health. There are a lot of reasons to protect trees, and of course they also protect us. So providing help with nature deficit disorders, preventing obesity, cleaning the air, reducing asthma. People actually heal faster, up to 30% faster when they can see or access green. So in this picture at the right, we're actually planting trees outside a recovery unit at the Veterans Hospital in Richmond, Virginia. Less crime also occurs near trees. You often hear, I don't want to plant trees in my city, criminals hide behind them. Not true. Actually, treed areas have less crime, and employees will exercise if they can access green where they work. So treed areas give you healthier, safer communities. So last thought, all of these values can be sold to planners and others as ecosystem services, things you can have for free or mostly free, but you've got to identify them first and work to conserve them. So meta messages or big messages. Green infrastructure plans can create good decisions, since good decisions start with good data. They can create and sustain a strong economy, make you healthy and wealthy. Link everything you do together. It's about integrating what you do, not making more work. And make your locality smart and green. So I can't see you out there in webinar land, but I sincerely hope that no one is upside down. No one has suffered from PowerPoint poisoning because we are done. I've tried to allow some time for questions. So we'll have time now to answer questions, and I'll turn it back over to our other moderators. But if time is short and you don't get a chance to ask your question, please feel free to contact me by email, and I'll do my best to answer your question.
Oh, thank you, Karen. And this is Kelly McCarter. Before I turn this back over to Nancy Stairs, who will work with Karen on the questions that have been asked, I want to remind everyone to please use the chat window in the lower left-hand corner to ask your questions. And remember, if you don't get a chance to do so, you can always contact Karen. She has her contact information there in front of you. Now, for those of you who are planning to get credits, I just want to remind you that you must now complete the satisfaction survey and take and pass a short quiz in order to get your continuing education credits. I'm going to now provide the link in the chat window that I'm going to push to your computers, and this is where you will go to participate in those surveys and the short quiz. If you have no interest in continuing education credits, please stand by with us as the moderator will rejoin us to the presenter, and we will go ahead and make sure that you've got your continuing education credits.
Okay, so I'm just going to, there was a couple of questions that came up during Karen's talk. So one of them was, how much disturbance of the interior core could be allowed? Would installing a pipeline or power line through the area and then reforesting or allowing it to grow back minimize the adverse impacts?
Okay, so there's some complicated parts of your question. How much can be disturbed? What we do, I didn't really show sides of this today, but if there's, say, a building in the middle of the habitat core, we draw a circle around that too and take out that edge zone. And we'll keep doing that for all the things, and we say, do we still have at least 100 acres within that? Your question about the power line is tricky because some power lines or pipelines are more intrusive than others. It depends on how much land they clear. Generally, when we see a big power line going through, we call that a fragmenting feature, and we call that the edge of that habitat. However, I want to point out to everyone on the phone or on the call that there is a national program that works with power line companies to help them plant more vegetation that's short growing under the power lines, so that those areas under power lines or along pipelines don't have to be sort of a habitat dead zone. Because a lot of power companies kill everything with herbicides under there. So if you're interested in that, shoot me an email afterwards. I don't have the name of the program handy, but you can probably Google it. But there are ways for power companies to try to live a little bit more harmoniously with nature.
Okay, and someone else had the question with your points at the end there, Karen. Great statistics and selling points for green infrastructure. Are the sources and actual studies referenced on the website or documents?
Yes, all of those. I didn't want to clog up my PowerPoint with citations, but all of those statistics are included in our guide, and I believe at the beginning of this webinar, Nancy provided a link to the North Carolina guide, which is available online, so you could download that. Those are all found in Chapter 6.
Okay, and there was a question, how can green infrastructure help to reduce forest fragmentation, especially in urban areas? So.
Okay, so green infrastructure, as we're defining it for today, we're talking mostly about natural infrastructure. And so what we try to do, as I showed you in those slides, was to figure out first what is our urban canopy, which areas are better treed, how well treed are they, and then we often look at the age of those trees. So we might have an older urban neighborhood where trees are getting older, and we need to think about replanting plans. Just like us, trees get old and die. And then we also might look at vacant lots and think about whether there are opportunities that as those redevelop, we might work with the homeowner or developer to try to make sure that they're as green as possible. Sometimes we work with cities to help acquire those lots so that they can be purchased and become part of the green network. So there's lots of different ways to look at green infrastructure in cities. And one thing I could recommend, if you want to see our case study that we presented today in greater depth, on our website, gicinc.org/projects, you can go to our Richmond page and download the Richmond study that I showed briefly. It's a whole booklet with different ideas and different maps showing you how we think about green infrastructure in cities.
Okay, that's all the questions that I saw typed in there. If anybody else has a question, you can contact Karen directly. Oh wait, here, sorry. Any thoughts on how existing city infrastructure, for example overhead power lines, should be viewed in terms of supporting a healthy urban forest?
I don't really understand that question, I guess, because I don't think that overhead power lines necessarily support a healthy urban forest. What we try to do is to figure out where are those overhead power lines, and try to avoid planting trees under them or pick species that are not tall growing. Some communities also underground their power lines so that they can have greener streets, but you'll have to be very careful to make sure that you don't have conflicts between underground utilities and tree roots. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and also the Center for Watershed Protection have some excellent guides on how to better take care of our urban trees. Usually they don't have enough soil and planting area to live a long and healthy life. So there's a lot of different tools out there for better taking care of our urban forests. If anyone can't find those guides online, shoot me an email and I'll send you the citations.
Well, thank you very, very much, Nancy Stairs from the North Carolina Forest Service and Karen Firehock, our guest presenter today for this webinar on green infrastructure. I'd like to remind everyone that Planting in the Face of Change is an urban forestry webinar series provided by the North Carolina Forest Service, and our next webinar is scheduled for March 26th. Our speaker is Fred Turk from the Division of Forestry in Virginia, and he will be talking about urban interface, planning to coexist with nature in the interface. So thank you very much. We hope to see you again very soon.
Thank you.